Recent linguistic and DNA evidence means some historians here are rethinking the very identity and ancestry of Isla's inhabitants.
Beneath Scotland's craggy coastlines and mist-covered hills lies a story not etched in stone, but embedded in blood. For centuries, it was assumed the nation's roots ran Celtic and Viking.
The Vikings would have found it very easy to come here and to conquer. They had the best naval technology in Europe.
But genetic revelations now point to something deeper. Forgotten migrations, surviving Ice Age lineages, and a lost seafaring link that defies expectation. Now, to understand how this buried truth came to light, we need to travel back, not just through centuries of invasion and alliance, but into the DNA of a land where mountains shielded memory and bloodlines clung to life like moss on stone. Scotland's hidden time capsule. At the end of the last ice age, Scotland was not a land of castles or clans, but a raw, wind-swept frontier where glaciers still lingered in the valleys and sea levels crept slowly upward along the coasts. Around 12,000 years ago, as the ice retreated, the first small bands of hunters followed the returning herds into this northern wilderness. They built temporary camps near rivers, fished cold coastal waters, and left behind only faint traces in the soil. But their DNA tells a far more vivid story. Genetic reconstructions of these early inhabitants have revealed something that once seemed impossible. The first people of Scotland likely had dark skin, curly hair, and bright blue eyes, a combination inherited from Ice Age populations that had survived in southern Europe before spreading north again. These Mesolithic foragers were not the ancestors most people imagine when they picture early Scots. Yet, fragments of their genetic code still persist today. Modern studies suggest that around 5 to 10% of contemporary Scottish DNA can be traced back to these ancient hunter-gatherers. In remote glens and isolated islands, geography acted like a protective barrier, preserving lineages that vanished elsewhere in Europe. While waves of migration constantly reshaped the continent, Scotland's mountains, sea locks, and harsh terrain slowed the process. But that fragile continuity would not last forever, because thousands of years later, a new people arrived with the power to rewrite Scotland's genetic future. The Beaker shockwave. Roughly 4,500 years ago, a seismic shift rolled through Britain. Not geological, but genetic. It arrived quietly, not with conquest, but with pottery. The Beaker people, named after their distinctively shaped ceramic vessels, migrated into Britain from Central Europe and brought more than just new tools and customs. They carried a genetic code so dominant it nearly erased the past. Within just a few centuries of their arrival, something astonishing occurred. Studies of ancient DNA revealed that the Beaker newcomers replaced up to 90% of all male lineages across Britain. In genetic terms, that's nearly a complete reboot of the paternal bloodline. It wasn't the result of widespread violence or conquest, but of slow integration, families merging, older lines fading, and new ones taking root. Women with local ancestry had children with Beaker men, and over generations, the old male Y chromosome lines simply vanished from the record. This quiet revolution left an indelible mark on Scotland's population. Yet the full sweep of transformation never reached every corner. In the highlands and remote islands, the mountains and sea once again played protector. There, some of the ancient Mesolithic and early Neolithic DNA endured, preserved by isolation and a deep-rooted way of life that resisted easy assimilation. Scotland's modern genome still reflects this dual inheritance, part ancient hunter, part Bronze Age migrant. It's a biological palimpsest, where old and new coexist in a tangled thread. And it's this tension between what was lost and what survived that sets the stage for the next chapter. Because just as Scotland's genes were stabilizing into a new equilibrium, another identity began to rise, one that would fight from the shadows, defy empires, and vanish in plain sight. The painted ones never vanished. To the Roman Empire, Scotland was a mystery wrapped in mist. Its tribes didn't fold beneath imperial pressure. They painted their bodies blue, fought without warning, and vanished into forests and hills the legions couldn't tame. Rome called them the Picti, the Painted Ones. For centuries, historians believed these people simply disappeared from history. Their language lost, their culture absorbed, their bloodlines erased. But DNA tells a very different story. Rather than being wiped out or replaced, the Picts were the evolutionary result of what came before. Genetic sequencing reveals that they were descendants of the very Mesolithic foragers and Beaker migrants who had already formed Scotland's foundation. Their appearance in the historical record wasn't the arrival of a new group, but the emergence of a new identity. As Gaelic language and Christian influence spread in the centuries that followed, the Pictish culture gradually receded. But their DNA persisted, flowing silently through the veins of Highland families. Some of the highest concentrations of ancient Scottish genetic markers today are found in regions historically associated with Pictish settlement: Aberdeenshire, Moray, and the Northern Highlands. What vanished was not the people, but their name and voice. This revelation reframes a key chapter of Scottish history. The Picts weren't some ghost tribe swallowed by time. They were Scotland's own children, shape-shifting as the world changed around them. Their carvings still dot the countryside, etched into standing stones like silent witnesses. Their genes still echo through modern Scots. As we move forward in time, the outside world begins to press harder. Empires reach farther, and yet, even as waves of foreign soldiers and settlers arrive, the deeper threads of Scotland's genetic story hold firm, though now they begin to branch in unexpected directions. Bloodlines without borders. When the Roman legions pushed into northern Britain in the 1st century AD, they met a land that refused to bend. Caledonia, Scotland's ancient name, proved too wild, too rugged, and too resilient for even Rome's might. The empire built walls, stationed garrisons, and declared victory, but it never truly conquered the highlands. And yet, Rome still left a trace, quiet, subtle, and buried not in ruins, but in DNA. Along the southern edge of Scotland, geneticists have uncovered markers that don't trace to Italy or even Gaul, but to far-off corners of the empire: North Africa, the Levant, and the Iberian Peninsula. Roman soldiers recruited for service along Hadrian's Wall weren't just European. They came from modern-day Syria, Morocco, and Spain, and some of them settled, started families, and never left. This diffusion didn't occur through force or domination. It spread through marriage, birth, and quiet domestic life on the fringe of empire. And centuries later, those faint genetic threads remain. Rare, but undeniable proof that Scotland was never as sealed off as it seemed. Later, when the Vikings arrived, they added another layer. But even their presence wasn't limited to bloodshed and plunder. Longships carried not only warriors, but traders and settlers who brought with them genetic influences from as far east as the steppes of Russia. These scattered traces, from deserts and trade routes, from garrisons and longships, remind us that Scotland's story wasn't written only by those who arrived in force. Sometimes, it was shaped by those who stayed quietly behind, a lost maritime highway. For decades, genetic studies focused on overland migration, how people moved from the European continent into Britain by foot, wagon, or conquest. But one recent discovery reframed Scotland's prehistory in a way few anticipated. Researchers from the University of Edinburgh uncovered something remarkable in the DNA of Northwest Highlanders. Their genetic signatures didn't just match nearby populations. They clustered closely with ancient Irish and even Basque lineages from the Atlantic edge of Europe. This unexpected connection suggested the presence of a prehistoric maritime network, an ancient seafaring corridor that long predated the Viking Age. Thousands of years ago, before written history, coastal communities in modern-day Scotland, Ireland, and the Iberian Peninsula may have been connected not by roads, but by ocean routes. These early mariners, guided by stars, currents, and instinct, likely traded goods, stories, and perhaps even families across vast stretches of sea. The implications are profound. It means that Scotland wasn't only shaped by continental waves of migration, but also by a saltwater web of exchange now largely forgotten. This ancient Atlantic link predates even the Beaker culture, pushing Scotland's global ties back far earlier than once assumed. And while much of this maritime past has been lost to erosion and time, the DNA carries its memory. In coastal communities that seem removed from the world, the legacy of ancient sailors still pulses beneath the skin, a genetic breadcrumb trail stretching from Hebridean isles to distant Iberian cliffs. Red hair and the persistence of place. Among the most visible genetic signatures preserved in Scotland is one that turns heads, literally. Red hair, carried by a mutation in the MC1R gene, appears in roughly 13% of Scots, by far the highest percentage in the world. This trait, often accompanied by pale skin and freckles, is more than just a striking feature. It's an evolutionary response to the northern climate. In regions with limited sunlight, the mutation helped early inhabitants absorb more vitamin D. But it came with trade-offs: increased sensitivity to pain, so higher risk of skin cancer, and a distinct vulnerability to ultraviolet light. In much of the world, natural selection gradually reduced its frequency. But in Scotland, where overcast skies are more common than sun, geography protected it. Isolation didn't just preserve language and lineage, it preserved biology. The survival of this trait echoes the broader story written in Scotland's DNA. From Ice Age markers to Pictish ancestry, from Beaker bloodlines to Viking signatures, the land itself acted as a filter, sheltering some traits while allowing others to fade. Even as war, trade, and empire swept across the island, certain genes remained rooted, passed quietly from one generation to the next, like heather holding fast against the wind. Scotland's DNA tells a story older than stone walls and deeper than legend, a legacy of ancient voyages, lost identities, and hidden resilience. If this journey moved you, hit like, share it with someone who loves untold history, and subscribe for more forgotten stories written not in books, but in blood.